Okay, Burnley have been relegated from the Premier League. This follows on from a 2-1 defeat to Newcastle United. Going into the final day, their fate was in their hands. Leeds were hoping that, Leeds had to pull something out of the bag. They do. They've lost 2-1 to Newcastle United at home at Turf Moor, which means Leeds stay up. Although Leeds did get the result they needed today. Both results, them getting a positive result, Burnley losing. And several reasons for this. There are several reasons why Burnley are where they are. One, they started the season slowly. Two, very shortly after their poor start to the season, there was a massive COVID outbreak. Which then led to a pile-up of fixtures quite early on when other teams were not having a pile-up of fixtures. Burnley had a stack of games in hand, which you could think that could be a good thing. However, as the COVID pandemic impacted teams back in October, November, December time, it ultimately did impact the team that you could put on the field. They couldn't put their strongest lineup out through that period. They've had some injuries as well, but they didn't win those games in hand when they were rescheduled. So having 4 or 5 games in hand sounds great, but you've got to win those games in hand, and they didn't. But I did think at that point, even so, they could still get out of it. Then the post-Christmas period comes, and things don't improve. They start to struggle. They get that win over Everton. Then they sack Sean Dyche. And I thought that was the moment they're done. Results, ironically, improved after that. But unfortunately, and I will say this, Leeds and Everton, somehow in the last 6-7 weeks of the season, have pulled something out. Because Leeds were in free fall and Everton's away form is absolutely diabolical. When Sean Dyche was sacked, Leeds were just... How Leeds managed to put a team on the field at times with the amount of injuries they had is something else entirely. But Everton, they had won one game away from home since August. Everton's away record was going to kill them. Somehow, and I do mean this, somehow Everton have pulled off what I would class as the great escape with the way they were free-falling as well. All the clubs that have been relegated, plus the 2 teams that finished above Burnley in the leagues. The 3 teams relegated, including Burnley, plus the 2 teams above, have all sacked the manager that started the season. Watford have gone through 3 managers this season. So all the bottom 5 have replaced managers this season. That tells you something, doesn't it? I always say, Chelsea notwithstanding, as I always say this, teams that regularly change the manager are less successful. And ironically, Burnley have been the most stably run club out of the bottom 5 for the last decade. It's been Sean Dyche who's been the manager. All the other clubs around them have gone through multiple managerial changes. Multiple in that same period. But there are other reasons why Burnley got relegated. 1, they drew too many games. 2, you've got single-figure wins in 7. And obviously a negative goal differential will kill you, but 17 losses will kill you as well. Now, 14 draws, that's pretty excessive. If those 14 draws are turned to wins, that's 21 wins on the season. That is not a bad return if you think about it. However, they drew too many games. And you turn 3 or 4, maybe 5 of those draws into wins. They're above Brentford. They're above Southampton and Brentford. They're safe. Easily safe. Lower mid-table. That's something else they would have done in previous seasons, was some of those games they drew, they would have won. Another ironic thing is their goal difference is actually better than the teams above them and the teams below them. 3 teams above them have worse goal differences, and you look at Norwich's goal difference. That is ridiculously bad. That's 3-4 times as bad as Burnley's with -61. So it's not their defence which has been the problem. It's just not winning enough games and drawing too many games that would have been victories in seasons past. I mean, this was a European side a couple of seasons ago under Sean Dyche. So something has gone wrong, and it's not just the COVID pandemic affecting them at the start of the season. Something has gone wrong. And then you look at the ownership situation, which I think is a bigger concern than getting relegated. Now, if they were under the previous ownership, they've been relegated twice. They bounced back up. They've come back to the Premier League with Sean Dyche as manager the second time around. The problem is that the current ownership is different. It's been a leveraged takeover by an American-led consortium called ALK, which is very similar to Man United's leveraged takeover 18 years ago. They bought the club with other people's money, which means they had to service that debt. Now it's going to be harder to service that debt in the Championship. The COVID pandemic has had an impact, which is another reason why they managed to buy shares in the club so cheap, was partly to do with the finances. But the concerning thing is that the ownership model is not set up for relegation. That's another problem. It's an American sports model, very similar to Man United, the franchise sports model. And I fear for Burnley going forward. Now, I'm a Blackburn fan. I should be overjoyed that they're relegated from the Premier League. We get to, play them twice next season, hopefully in a playoff battle for a playoff place, back to the Premier League, because that's what I hope. Obviously, some of the friendly rivalry banter gets a bit more nasty between Blackburn and Burnley. We're one of the oldest rivalries in not just English football, but world football, because we're both founders of the Football League. Oh, yeah, we go that far back. The problem I have is we are racked with a load of debt. Burnley's debt is going to be harder to service than ours because we have been outside the Premier League for quite some time now. So we have now restructured our club to suit the Championship, sort of being around the playoff places. Burnley are suited to being a mid-table Premier League club with the way the club is structured. And I fear for what team they're going to be able to put on the field, in August when the season starts, and what's going to happen in the transfer window. How many of their squad currently will be sold, partly to service that debt and partly to reduce their wage bill so they actually don't breach the loss over profit 135% rule, which basically means if you're in breach of that, you are liable to get a points deduction and a fine. But what we've seen with the EFL and the Premier League and the FA is they would have to fine and deduct points from 60 to 70 clubs, which is just a massive PR disaster, and they're not going to do it. They've been cherry-picking the clubs that they have punished, such as Birmingham City and Reading, for example, Derby County, with their ownership issues. Everton may fall afoul of this at the start of next season, because Leeds and Burnley have actually launched a formal complaint against the fact they haven't been sanctioned for breaching financial fair play for the last couple of seasons. Now, that may be a desperate ploy to keep Burnley in the Premier League. I can't see that working. I can see a very similar situation to what Derby had with the start of this season. But the concern is that they tumble down the divisions. The concern is they end up like Leeds did back in the day with administration, or Portsmouth. Bradford City have struggled. They tumbled down the divisions. Oldham Athletic have tumbled out of the Football League. I'm a Blackburn fan. We were in League One at one point. There are multiple ex-Premier League clubs from the entire history of the Premier League who, once get relegated out, have never come back. The thing is, Watford and Norwich are better suited with the structures of the way their clubs are run to bounce back within a season or two. That's why they're yo-yo clubs. Burnley are not a yo-yo club. They have been a Premier League stalwart for a very long time with Sean Dyche as manager. Now, when they sacked Sean Dyche, that was the stability gone. That was a move by an ownership group that don't know what they're doing when it comes to relegation and promotion sport. That is a move done by an ownership group that are used to a franchise system in the US where there is no promotion and relegation, very similar to the Glazers. They run their club like a commercial club, not a sporting club. And I think, while Burnley's a smaller version of Man United, the fan base isn't as big, the fan base isn't as wealthy, and the club is not set up financially to earn less revenue in the Championship with reduced TV money and reduced ticket revenue. I really do fear for Burnley going forward. I say that as a Blackburn fan. I want to see a healthy rivalry between the two clubs, and I wish both clubs were still Premier League clubs. It adds something to the rivalry when we're competing in the same division regularly. And we haven't done that for a very long time because either club is in the division below. And that hasn't happened regularly in recent years, which is a shame. One of the oldest rivalries, I think, the oldest rivalry, in my opinion, in the Football League, other than Notts County, Nottingham Forest, Sheffield Wednesday and Sheffield United. I honestly believe that a weakened Burnley damages the image of English football. It's the same. I mean, while I'm not an Everton, I'm not a Liverpool fan. If Everton were to go down the same road, it would weaken the English game. If Arsenal and Tottenham were to end up, in theory, in the same position, or Chelsea were to end up in the same position, and that could happen if they don't get their club sold. They could end up starting the season with, again, a points deduction. Same could Everton. The game loses something. And Burnley getting relegated, I have grave concerns about the direction at Turf Moor and what's going to happen, especially with that debt and especially with the ownership structure in place. It's a poor man's Man United, basically, with that leverage takeover, but I have deep, grave concerns going forward. And while many a Blackburn fan will be laughing right now, going, our biggest rivals have had it, I tell you now, if our biggest rivals go bust, English football loses something. We lose that battle between Ewood and Turf Moor. We lose that rivalry, and we lose that competitiveness, which is what drives the sport. So I hope they bounce back, but I have grave concerns about the future of Burnley Football Club. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Please place your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.